I would be, I think, remiss if I have you on, a disruptor, early disruptor of the media, and me, an early disruptor of the media. You did Daily Wire, I did Blaze. I have to ask you, Ben, the state of the media and the power of what now is, I think, mainstream, but was called the alternative media. It's astonishing on what's happened, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, it's amazing. There are people who are claiming all the way back in like 2004. I remember when Dan Rather put out that fake letter about George W. Bush.
Yeah.
And people on our side were like, the mainstream media is dead. And then they spent the next, nearly 20 years proving they certainly were not dead. And they could define narratives and they could lie. And they could really define how Americans thought on a wide variety of issues ranging from BLM to COVID to Russiagate to all of that sort of stuff. I think 2024 was a definitive nail in the coffin, maybe the last nail in the coffin for the legacy media. Like the legacy media's ratings are awful. That doesn't mean their numbers are awful, meaning they're a fan club, right? The New York Times is a left-wing fan club. It's no longer seen as a sort of objective source of news. The New York Times is what we are, but for the left, right? I mean, everyone knows we're conservative. Mm-hmm. And so if you're conservative, maybe you subscribe to Daily Wire, you're subscribed to The Blaze. And if you're a lefty, you subscribe to the New York Times. It's the paper of record for leftists. But no one perceives the New York Times as a sort of middle-of-the-road, objective newspaper that's simply trying to separate the facts from the opinion. No one perceives them that way. And with that, they lose an enormous amount of their sort of brand leverage. That's even more true of the Washington Post, which doesn't have the circulation of the New York Times and is beclowning itself every single day. And I think one of the things that the media are struggling with right now is they keep trying to turn the ship, and they don't realize that the wheel has been disconnected from the rudder.
Yeah.
They actually don't have control of the ship anymore. That rudder is not connected to the thing they're trying to steer. And so they keep trying to create and craft new narratives and throw them out there. So they went from it's a threat to democracy to constitutional crisis. And everybody's just like, no. The answer is no. And I think that is a tribute to what, all of us in the alternative media have done, weathering, by the way, an extraordinary number of storms thrown at us by the federal government and its apparatchiks and social media. I mean, I think people need to understand, we've spoken about this before between us and also just generally, the amount of pressure that was put on social media by Democrats in the federal government to shut down alternative media was extraordinary, and it was real. It was an attempt to destroy all competition to the legacy media. And that was the prevailing way that social media acted basically from 2017 all the way until 2024. There were intermittent periods where they sort of let up the boot off the neck briefly, and then the Democrats would threaten them and they'd put the boot right back down on the neck.
Yeah.
And I think that 2024, by Trump winning in spite of all of that, by Democrats not being able to control the narrative, I think that the legacy media has been definitively castrated here. And I think, by the way, the turning point is not just the perseverance of people in the alternative media, which obviously is a huge thing. The thing is that Joe Biden is guilty. Joe Biden did this. And the reason Joe Biden did this, I think that the most undercovered story of the last election is maybe the most covered story, but still I think people underestimate its significance. Joe Biden effing that debate with Trump was the single most important political moment probably of our lifetimes, because it wasn't just that it forced him out of the race. What it did is it exposed the entire legacy media infrastructure, all of them, all at once. Right? They had been saying for years. You and I were talking about Joe Biden being senile in like 2019.
Yeah, I know.
Right? And they were like, no, he's fine. He's totally fine. It was a cheap, literally weeks before that debate, they were saying it was a cheap fake to show tape of him on stage with Obama guiding him off stage because he didn't know where the hell he was. Right? Like that. So they were maintaining that narrative consistently. And then Joe Biden was stupid enough to get on that debate stage. And I was like, well, maybe he knows something we don't. Maybe the media knows something we don't. Because what moron would go on a debate stage knowing he's senile, only to I remember because we were covering the debate for Daily Wire. We did our backstage and then we covered the debate. I remember saying right beforehand, well, the one thing we know is not going to happen is he's not going to just die up there, right? I mean, like, he wouldn't do it if you were going to just die up there. That'd be crazy if you were just going to go up there. Like, they'll shoot him up with something, right? We were all having these conversations between us. It's like, okay, what sort of concoction are they going to pump meth? Like, what's it going to be? What's the jab that goes into him to keep him fairly alive throughout this debate? Because we'd seen it before, right? State of the Union to get him a little bit pumped up. It's like 8:05 at night. He could go for like 30 minutes. He'd start to wind down. But he wasn't going to like die up there. And then he went up there and he died. I mean, he almost literally died on the stage.
Almost immediately.
Right out the gate. I mean, it started, and there was a picture of him staring at the grim visage of death off screen with the goggly eyes, and you were like, oh my God, death is going to take him in the middle of this. Like, he can actually see the Grim Reaper with the Sith standing off to the side. No one else can see it. It's an episode of The Twilight Zone, and he's staring at it,
right.
And we're watching him on split screen. And I think in that moment, the legacy media died. In that moment, it became clear that they were not surprised by this because none of us had access to Biden, right? You hadn't interviewed Biden. I didn't interview Biden. And they wouldn't give us access to Biden. But all these guys had access to Biden. And so that means they knew. They were in the know for years. And then the story started coming out about how the legacy media actually did know for years, about how they'd been at events with him where he'd had to be basically guided out, where he would blankly stare at people, not understanding that he was in the middle of a conversation. And so at that very moment, the entire American public was subjected to the reality, which is these people lie, and they lie with an agenda. And you can't put that genie back in the bottle. They tried to do it by pretending they were shocked. Right? They went on TV that night. Oh, my God, we're so shocked. Right. No, you're not. You all knew him. You saw him last week. You went to the White House and watched him fall asleep and his face fall into his gruel. Like, you watched it happen, and then you lied to us with motivation. And so, no, you don't get back your credibility after that. You blew it, and you blew it irreparably.